Everybody, AWOL here, joined by Ashrel, aka Andrew Perrin, and Ross, a Dylan of VGFGamers. And in today's episode of the Digital Drop podcast, where we make working from home simple, we're going to talk about how you can start your own podcast, because we've launched our Digital Drop podcast very successfully, and it's a sponsored podcast. But VGFGamers here has launched his recently, and he's now getting thousands of views per now streaming on Twitter. And he's really launched this thing in a way, learning from the lessons that we've learned from in the past as a team and from the lessons of our professional clients, the influencers and media companies that we've helped launch their podcasts for them. We're going to condense all of that today for you in about 30 minutes and let you know how to start a podcast, how to avoid those critical mistakes, and hopefully you can get yours off the ground and really benefit from it in multiple ways. Ross, your podcast is up, dude. I can't believe it. You surprised us with this one. Let me just show it on the screen here. You surprised us with your podcast. You're like, guys, I made a podcast. Check it out. I'm like, wow, VGFGamers made a podcast. Tell us about your decision to make a podcast. Why did you decide to make a podcast? And how did you decide what the content was going to be for this podcast after years and years and years of already releasing content on Twitter with gaming memes and humor and news and facts? Why a podcast and why now?
Well, I come from a radio background, actually. That's what I went to college for, broadcast journalism. I had my own sports talk radio show for a couple of years as well. And I've enjoyed doing the podcast with you guys throughout the days. And it just felt like the next natural step. And also, this was a decision made, like we kind of talked about yesterday, just based on the current climate that we're in. It just felt like there was going to be an opportunity where people needed more entertainment, a different kind of entertainment. And the whole purpose behind the podcast was to bring on people from the gaming industry, whether it's voice actors, developers, writers. I'm really excited to talk to writers, people who are outside that play professionally. Like I've got an NFL player scheduled to come on, and he's actually a professional gamer. I want to talk about his life and stuff like that.
Nice.
I want to, I want to make this. I want to humanize the gaming industry. We all see the gaming industry like it helps to appreciate it more, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It helps to appreciate the people who are working behind the scenes, who are working on camera, in the mocap suits, writing behind it. It helps you appreciate more if you know what their life is like, if you know what they're passionate about, maybe outside of gaming. And then it helps you take that respect level. It just takes the respect to a completely different level. And that's my whole entire mission with this podcast.
I love it. So it dives into the gaming industry, which is interesting because your gaming humor and news account obviously covers the current events of the gaming industry. You're followed by almost like all of the executives and people that work in gaming, surprisingly. Like I have access to your Twitter account, right? And I'm looking
that's
at
actually
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's actually, I was like, all right, so who follows this account? And that's when I actually started deciding like, well, who am I going to reach out to get on the podcast?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I see notifications in your feed on VGFGamers of like top-notch developers, influencers, of people that work for IGN and all these publications. They all follow you because you are like the #1 gaming meme account, to my knowledge, on the internet, or on Twitter at the very least. There are other ones out there, but yours has been there for longer, and everybody just goes to you for their gaming funnies. And so that gives you a lot of influence and a lot of leverage to bring on guests on the show. So the fact that you got Kate Drummond out the gate, I'm like, how did you book these guests right when you started? And it sounds like you waited until you had influence and then you did the podcast, as opposed to doing the podcast to get influence. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. I actually did an episode of the podcast back in 2016. This is a true story. I had planned everything out for this podcast, what I was going to do, first episode, and then literally like 2 days before was when a school shooting happened, and that immediately led to everybody blaming video games, like we see trending. So my first episode of that podcast, and this is a good mistake to learn from, I just laid out all the facts, didn't take any sides, just all the facts about gaming and mental health and how it affects, potential violence and stuff like that. And it bombed. It bombed bad. People were very upset that I was bringing politics into a gaming podcast, even though I was on the side of gamers. So that's serves as a warning to make sure you know what you're doing before you go in. You don't, just because you're talking about gaming, if you start mixing other stuff in, you're still going to alienate a large portion of your audience, especially something that's so divisive.
That totally makes sense. So you had this early attempt at doing a podcast. It didn't work out.
Yeah.
You took a giant break and you decided not to do any more podcasting from there. And so then now you're doing multiple formats on your socials with the podcast. So obviously you've got the audio version, which you already have 3 episodes that are going up on Apple Podcasts, which this is the #1 podcasting platform, but also Spotify, and Spotify actually gets a lot of plays as well. But you have also done a live stream related to the podcast too. This little guy right here, and that got 7,000 views. That got 7,000 views on your Twitter account of you like drinking alcohol, it appears, and doing a live podcast.
Yeah, I mean, very, very, very controlled. I'm not going on and like ranting with alcohol like on like a drunk rave.
Right.
Like it's just a very cool climate, and But yeah. But yeah, and actually, to your point, I actually have.
Why not? I was just gonna say, like, to your point, I actually have a podcast. Yeah.
Well, I actually started the first 2 episodes are audio only. And that was a mistake, but I'm honestly just more comfortable doing audio just because that's what my background's in. I don't have a background in, necessarily being on video, but unfortunately, if this is 2020, if this is going to work, this is going to have to be video. And since I have the equipment to do it, there is no excuse for me to not be doing it at this point if I really want this to succeed. Especially, like when I can literally just go live right on Twitter right there and do the podcast, pull guests on. I'm going to lose a lot of people on the Twitter account because of it, because that's not why they followed me. That's cool. I understand. See you later. But this is where it's going to go right now. And so if you have the capability, if you're looking to starting a podcast and you have the capability to do video with it, I mean, we all know it's not a mystery that that's where the future is. That's where it is right now, let alone in the future. So you might as well start off by hitting it on all cylinders. And I did not with this, and that was my mistake.
Okay, that's fair enough. Now, Perrin, I know that we've experimented and with clients and with different businesses that we've worked with, different formats for podcasting, including us. We started live, then we went blah, blah, blah. What is the best format to do for a podcast right now, Andrew Perrin, in your experience with all the clients you've served? And then I'll kick it over to you, Ross, to get your opinion. Do you need to go live? Do you need to do video? Do you need to do audio only? What is it that you need to be doing?
So this goes back to 2018. Remember when we were doing algorithm research, and I try to keep up with that as much as I can. Admittedly, I'm kind of behind on it now, but not much has changed. So we went through and we specifically studied and looked at how every algorithm works on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. And the one thing across the board that was the case is that live video is always #1 in the algorithm. And if you're doing anything but that, it's just going to be less. And I found this, we found this in our own experience with the Digital Drop podcast right here. I found this with 3 clients now. I keep running into clients who really put together this great podcast. There's lots of people out there who want to make podcasts right now. And honestly, it's a great time to make a podcast. It's a great way to start off a brand. But they always envision it, the ultimate pinnacle formula being audio and video with a still image and subtitles and captions. And it's just, no. I've had 3 clients now who've wanted to do that. And every time I recommend, hey, can you get your face live on screen and do this instead? Because it's going to get 10 to 50 times more engagement. It's going to do so much better. And it's been a struggle to convince, people that that's the case, because they have this idea that podcasts are audio only. And you can distribute audio as part of your podcast, but I think a primary component should be live video, especially if you're distributing on social, which is one of the most important outlets for you to be on with this thing. So, I mean, that's why this show here now is live and why we're back to that. That's why
that's why we're live right now. That's right.
Trying to convince them to, hey, can you go live? Or at the very least, can you get your face on screen, talk with, and whoever else you're talking to on screen, you guys talking together in a video frame. That's like, at least have that. So I know, Ross, you started like, I'm not sure if you started right away with video or what it ended up bringing you over to video with the VGF podcast.
Well, it's a little bit of common sense with video. I mean, okay, first of all, first things first, let's call it what it is. It's a meme page. Nobody has any right. Nobody's going to be taking me seriously right out of the gate. Nobody knows my background. Nobody knows who I am. And if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't be taking somebody that on a meme page just launches a random podcast too. That's dumb. It's
why wouldn't we take this image seriously?
I totally disagree.
Why are we taking this image seriously? Like, this is very serious content right here on your page, Ross. Like, you're really underplaying the professionalism of VGF Gamers. Yes. And for those of you listening to the audio version, it's a meme with Stewie in it, like with droopy skin, and it's ridiculous. Anyway, please continue.
No, but you're right. But I mean, Perrin, I'll give you a chance to rebuttal because it sounds like maybe you would. I necessarily wouldn't. I wouldn't expect other people to take me seriously. There is a trust element that comes with putting yourself on video to actually, where it looks like you're physically communicating with somebody. They can immediately get to know you. Then when they go listen to the audio, it helps their mind imagine what they're actually seeing and stuff like that. It's just, you have to, when you go from never showing yourself and all of a sudden the next step is audio, you're not going to get that trust. You got to make the jump. You really got to throw yourself out there if you're going to make something like this work. And that's the two mistakes that I made with the first two episodes. Like the first episode on the podcast, Roger Craig Smith was doing ASMR as Sonic and Ezio Auditore. That would have been so much better on video compared to audio, and it crushed on audio. It was fantastic. But there's that actual element of where you don't have to put your imagination to work and you can literally just digest the content as it is. It may sound like that's an incredibly small step, but when you actually go and look at the numbers, you'll immediately see a drastic difference.
That totally makes sense. And depending on your audience, they maybe just be consuming the majority of their content through video anyway. So you really need to think about who those people are. Gamers in particular, they watch lots of videos and lots of live streams. So you should probably be feeding them videos and live streams. However, on the audio side, there are a number of people that maybe do catch your live stream from time to time. They catch your video from time to time. But while they're in the car, they want to listen to you. And so you need to make your content available everywhere and in every format you can in a really lean way. So you don't have to spend a ton of time, right, on doing, intense editing on every episode. We're doing 5 episodes per week now of this podcast, and we don't edit it at all. Now, for you, Ross, I know you're a professional audio editor in particular. And so when you have a professional guest on, you have to make sure that you're putting them in the best light. And you have to edit them in that way, right? But with the three of us, if we flub, if I screw up something technically during the live stream, if or whatever, the three of us don't care, right? Because we're just trying to get the content out there. But for you, and when you have a guest, you do need to take more care and you need to do intense multi-hour editing. So tell us, to produce one episode of a professionally produced audio podcast where you have a guest, you edit it, you take out all the ums and ahs, you go to distribute it, how long does that process take from booking to release? Just so people have an idea of what this intense produced podcast actually entails from a time investment perspective.
Well, first of all, when you're booking a guest, and I'll make this short because the process actually starts from the second after the book has confirmed they will come on. But when you're booking a guest, the easiest thing to do is make sure they have all the information about your podcast right up front. So they don't need to ask any questions when they respond to you. That's the fastest way to get a guest. So starting from the point where the guest says, okay, we're going to do this at 3 p.m. on Monday. So right then, however long in advance that is, you better say it's one day, make sure you have at least a list of, 15, 20 hit points that you can talk about. Now, like when I'm doing the interviews, I hit like 5 of them. That's just generally how they go, but make sure that you have, plenty to talk about. So do your research on the guest work, prepare for it. The next step is make sure all the technical elements are set. How do you want to do this? Do they have, I typically do it where the first 2 episodes were actually released as audio, but we did do them over video chat. So, we could see. I recommend doing that even if you're doing audio, simply because it's just much easier to communicate when you're actually making eye contact with somebody, and it helps make the conversations a lot more meaningful. So
really quick, let's hit pause on that. Let's
Yep,
name a few platforms that people can use to talk with guests that we would recommend. Which ones do you like? Just say the names of the platforms so people can go look at them.
Honestly, do you mean to do video chat and record from there?
Yeah, to actually interact with the guests remotely like we're doing. What platforms have we used successfully, and what platforms have we used and kind of suck? So we can get them the right platforms to use out the gate so they can save time with technical flubs and all the garbage.
Right. Now, technically, what I typically do, because we're actually fortunate enough that we have mixers, I will do any video chat that they want because I have a Mac. If they want to do FaceTime, I've done that. If they want to do Google Chat, Skype, whatever it is, because then I can just record the audio right to my mixer. So it doesn't really matter how we go about it. But as far as video chat, you would know more about the video chat. I think that as far as if you're booking guests for only audio, I know we've used Zencastr in the past, which it's good if you're all on the same internet speed, because what happens then on Zencastr is you have to download the file. Each individual person who's talking, you have to download their files and then mix and match. And it's not always too easy to match if there's different internet speeds. But which video platforms have you guys used? Because I'm actually curious about this, because that may...
I still recommend Zencastr. We got off of Zencastr because we got frustrated with some technical flubs that we had with it just because of internet issues. But Zencastr right now, for those new podcasters out there, they're doing a promotional offer with unlimited guests and recording time during the coronavirus outbreak. So they know people are like all thinking about starting a podcast right now. We use Zencastr to do our first like 20 or 30 episodes, and other clients I've worked with in the past still use Zencastr. Zencastr is an audio only platform though. There's no video. So what it allows you to do is you give a link to a guest. They can join your Zencastr session, which is what you see in this little monitor graphic here. And then it records the podcast to Zencastr on the cloud. It records the podcast on everyone's individual computer too. So you have a primary and a backup recording in case something bad happens. And it's really the easiest solution for doing remote audio only recording. However, it has no video. And so down the road, when you get next level with your podcast, you're going to want to do video if you want your podcast to get any real traction in the long term. Obviously, there are exceptions, but most major podcasts these days are video podcasts or have a video component at this point. So you definitely need to be thinking about that. But video platforms, Perrin, we've tested all kinds of video platforms over the years, different ways of conferencing with each other and what have you. And in my experience, none of them are reliable. Like right now, we're using an enterprise video solution right now that costs $1,300 a year, something like that, the one that we're currently using through Vimeo. And as you see, there's a few stutters right here in the actual calls of the guests, right? So even really expensive video platforms, they all have issues. Every single one of them. It doesn't matter how good they are. Perrin, have you used any video platforms in the past that you find to be more reliable or not? Or do they all have intermittent stuttering issues in your experience?
Squad Trek here in chat mentioned he uses Discord, and that reminded me of in the beginning with this podcast, we were using Discord too. And we had server latency issues with that. I think it will work for people who are in similar regions. Like if you're casting with someone from Washington, DC, and you're from New York, right? Like if you're kind of close geographically and you can all use like the US East server, yes. But we did run into if we did not run into server latency issues, I think it would have been fine. but with everybody on video, and the more people you have on video in on that, it seemed to not be able to handle it after a while. I'm sure experiences will vary there. I imagine if you have a great internet connection and it's very stable and you have your guests are in the same boat, you could probably use Discord very effectively for a video podcast. Trying to think of any other softwares I've used. That's the most noteworthy.
Zoom is really popular. Yeah, Zoom is really popular
Zoom
right
is
now.
Zoom is pretty big.
Yeah.
Zoom is pretty stable in terms of like latency, but I think the overall quality was just less because of its encoding. But it's been a while, so like if you're don't necessarily take my word on Zoom, give that one a try. But I've noticed that more and more work from home people have been using Zoom over things like GoToMeeting and stuff like that. So Zoom has increased in popularity over time. One I would stay away from is, what is it? Uber Conference, I think.
Uber
Conference, I don't know
is
why
bad.
you would necessarily use that for a video podcast, but it was pretty terrible, to the point where, I mean, in business, the thing to do while you were waiting for everybody to join the call was to make fun of Uber Conference a little bit. So we just had bad experience with overall quality and connection with that as well, more so than any of the other platforms. So I would stay away from these like older, like corporatized video meeting softwares and try to go for ones that were meant for broadcasting, right? What is the one you're using now, AWOL, the one you're streaming live with right now? Which one was that?
Yeah, the one I'm streaming live with right now is great if my connection weren't fluctuating. So that sucks. But the one I'm using right now is called Livestream Studio with Vimeo. This is it's like an enterprise level software for professional production. And it's good because you can do like a link to get guests to join, like we're doing right now. And they can just click and they can just join your session, and it works great. However, there's always going to be latency issues, internet issues, and even stuttering issues with video with any of these softwares. So that's just the way it is when you're doing a live or video podcast. And so that's just something you're going to have to accept. That's just how it is. There is no solution that works all the time and is extremely reliable. That's just how it is. And so just be prepared for that if you're doing a live podcast in particular. Now, if you do a video recording of everyone speaking and then you edit it together later as a video podcast, that will be perfectly reliable if every person records their own video feed. But that requires a lot of editing, a lot of file transfer, and a lot of issues, basically, with time and production for each episode, which is obviously not ideal. Cool. So are you guys still with me?
Yeah.
Ross's audio
it's kind of funny that the stream is lagging
Ross's
when we're
audio
having
is
this
not
discussion
working
right now. So
no, I'm good. I'm good.
Did we lose
I'm
him?
good. I was asking real quick, if having multiple
Okay,
people
he's
on one stream, does that affect it compared to just one?
on our software? I don't know. I don't want to have this discussion in the middle of an episode, but yes, it does
Any
for
software,
sure.
yeah.
The more people that you,
Well, not like about.
no, we should talk
general.
about this. Yeah, in general, the more people you have on a call and the more people you have in a discussion, the more chances there are of having technical issues during a live podcast, for sure. Like right now, we have all three of us on this podcast. All three of our connections have to be processed by one computer. So there's 3 times the issues that could happen. So the more people on your podcast, the more difficult it is. So if you just do one-on-one conversations, it's usually at least 30% more reliable than having 3 people conversations, and it's 75% more reliable than having 4-person conversations, because whenever you add an extra person, you add extra problems from a technical standpoint. That's why most podcasts are one-on-one, because from a technical standpoint, it's way easier to execute, to coordinate, and to ensure that you only have 2 working internet connections and rigs in order to make it work. So speaking of which, we should probably call it right there, because my internet connection sucks right now. So those of you that have the recording, it's going to be perfect. And those that turned in live, sorry, there was some frame drops and what have you. That's my DS. I have a dedicated DSL line, and my DSL line, even my DSL line, has issues from time to time. It's just how it is. Any closing thoughts on how to start a podcast that we should share with our audience? Ross.
Just do it. Now's the time. If you're thinking about doing it, just do it. Everyone asks, how can you get on all these platforms? It's actually incredibly easy. All you have to do is, once you have a recording done, submit the RSS feed to all the different platforms. It's really simple. Now's the time to do it. If you're sitting home wanting to get going in something, just dedicate yourself to it. Don't just do one episode and quit. Dedicate to yourself. Make it something you're passionate about and just go. Just do it.
Makes sense. And Libsyn is the platform that you can use if you want to distribute your audio podcast on a bunch of different platforms. You just add a new episode, you upload the media file in Libsyn, and when you connect all your RSS feeds to all the other platforms, such as Spotify, such as Google Play, such as SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, what have you, and you upload the episode, it'll go to all podcasting platforms simultaneously. Without you having to do anything. Just one upload and it goes to everything on the internet. That's what we do with the Digital Drop podcast, and we have these episodes up everywhere all at the same time. Thank you so much for watching. We appreciate it. We're going to be back every single weekday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And if you have any questions for us, hit us up on Twitter at Digital Drop Pod. We're happy to answer any of your questions, and we're happy to help you if you need more personalized support from me, Andrew Perrin, or Ross. We're all consultants, so if you need us to spend one-on-one time with you, we can also do that. So just let us know, hit us up on Twitter, and we can help you with that. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Digital Drop.